Okay, so Chuck was right. And I'm going to put his channel up. Chuck is at Sea Fenster, and I can't remember if it's Sea Fenster or Sea Fenster Farm. But he warned us that cats and greenhouses do not mix. Our problem is that we have a huge vole population. And I don't know if you can see it as well from here. Can you see it? Can you see where it is?
Yeah, right here.
And
so they grab with their claws and they'll pick.
oh, but yeah, don't stick your own finger through it, because at this point it's just a tiny hole.
I'm just letting.
So what happened is
all over.
that as we have cats that get hungry, because what works with our cats is that we will feed them on occasion, but we try to make them hungry. Otherwise, they won't go out and hunt the voles. So when the cats get hungry, what they'll do is they'll come out and walk past the greenhouse, and the cat and the quail will blow up. In other words, they'll fly up into the greenhouse, the cats will see it, and then the cats will jump at it, which leaves these puncture holes in the plastic. Now, this is a problem because it means that we cannot get the double layer of plastic to inflate. Now, the other reason that I'm a little worried, a little concerned this winter is that if we have rabbits and ducks and quail in that greenhouse, then wildlife, things like skunks and fox, and possibly even neighbors' dogs. Now, if you've got all this wildlife in there making noise, or the domesticated animals in there making noise, all the tame life in there making noise, then all that's standing between your animals and the outside predator is a little piece of plastic. And so Mr. Dirt and I, yeah, as you walk past they kind of flip out, but if you want to stay away from it, babe, because I don't have the netting up inside there to keep them from flying out into the ducks.
Go ahead. If you wanted to see a really big one, there's a good one over here.
Right.
There's two over there.
So, is everything still intact? Yeah. And I don't think the cats are doing that frequently. I think that in the beginning they did it. Otherwise we'd have like actual drag lines down it instead of punctures. So, yes, Chuck, you were 100% correct. And I can't get rid of the cats because of the voles. So, this snow fence here was meant to keep the ducks in so that they would eat down all the vegetation, but they went under it, which is no huge surprise. It's just we were trying what we already had and what we could do for free. But, babe, this is the part where I'm talking to you, so you might want to come a little closer. We're trying to figure out a way to fence this area so that we can keep the ducks in it so that we can find their eggs. Because when they're in the backyard, they go out and hide underneath the bushes and lay their eggs there, or under the rhubarb, or wherever else. So they need kind of an open space. And we need them to mash down the weeds and eat the weeds. So we need the ducks in here, but not only do we need the ducks in here, we need a regular proper fence around the greenhouse where we can run an electrical line really, really close to the bottom, and then an electrical line at the top with just chicken wire along as actual fencing, and have the electrical line facing outwards towards the pasture rather than inwards towards the greenhouse, just to deter predators. And so the problem is it's really hard to pound posts out here. Let's see, can we find cobblestones? This is, I'll try to get out of the way. This is what our rocks look like, and that's actually a spot that doesn't have as many rocks as what you find once you start pounding posts.
Okay. See how this one is at a lovely angle and backward? It started straight, and there's no way to get it in anywhere because it has to worm around all the rocks that are in there. And eventually, that was as straight as it would get.
And so what Mr. Dirt does is he comes out with a digger link, which is from digging potatoes. So it's like a big...
It's rebar, is what it is.
Yeah.
It's about that long, and you chop off one half, and so you got a nice spike on one side, and then you have to pound it in with a sledgehammer, and it's just miserable.
Yeah.
going around.
So these push-in posts, these step-in posts that are meant just to be able to step in and put them in the field, they don't work here.
They don't step.
You have to put the rebar in first, make the hole, then put these stakes in, which means that it's not a real secure fence. The reason over there that we have pallets for our fence is because it's just easier. The less stakes you have to put in, the easier it is out here. It is doable to put the stakes in, but they cannot. These ones can't hold hardly any weight at all. And if we're going to put up proper fencing, we probably need to put in T-posts. So what Mr. Dirt and I are talking about right now is how to fix this up, because now we have half of our livestock out here in this greenhouse, and I do think that it's going to work. For one thing, the rabbits it'll make easier because I won't have water freezing, and that's something we really struggle with in the winter, is keeping the rabbits' water from freezing. We made sure not to put the rabbits up next to the wall because their urine will burn through the plastic. And some people have asked, well, why don't you put your rabbits inside your garage? And well, their urine will stain and destroy walls too. And so
Seems to do it to concrete too, even though you know it's like acid.
well, and like we've tried to keep them in our outbuilding out there with the goats, and what happens is in the summer especially, the sun comes in from the east and it's like an oven in there. It just gets too hot for the rabbits. In the winter it's good underneath. It's good in the backyard, except that the water freezes. And we have had success with kindling in February, and that all went fine and good, and they were safe, and all the babies made it. But for the book, for the ebook, we're going to try it in the greenhouse and see who dies and who doesn't die, which is kind of a harsh way to say it, but I'm going to do my best not to have any of the animals die. And you can see these furring strips that I put along this wall because all of the, they sent us like these rolls of plastic that we were just supposed to put in with the staple gun, and it instantly just blew. Yeah, it instantly just blew off because our wind gets so strong out here. So again, the greenhouse is meant to be a learning experience for us. We just wanted to have something to experiment with. And yeah. So now we're brainstorming about how to get these posts in the ground, because we do have T-posts, but that's a lot of T-posts to put in.
Well, and again, getting it around the rocks, the T-posts do the same thing as these.
Yeah, it's really hard to line up a T-post so that you can then use the insulators on them, because the T-posts themselves will twist and turn in the rocks, so that then you have the little snap-on insulators. You have one on one side of the fence and one on the other side of the fence, and it makes for a very untidy looking fence. And so we're just kind of we're trying to work with the situation as best we can. The problem with just doing electrical line here, which, I mean, you know, we could, but the problem is that birds are insulated by their feathers, and so they figure out that if they walk through it quickly, it won't shock them. Because that would be the easiest thing, just to come out and put a couple strands of electrical wire down, and then two at the bottom and one at the top, and just allow the ducks to stay inside there and have it be good enough, because that would also deter foxes and skunks. But the problem is that when we did that with the chickens, they just walked through it. Granted, they're a lot faster than a chicken, or than a duck. A chicken's faster than a duck. I think a duck would get really caught up on it. So I guess we could try just doing.
If not, we'll have roast poultry.
Well, our solar one isn't strong enough to hurt anything. I'm not sure that it would even shock them.
We were already debating getting a stronger one.
Yeah, our thoughts are that we need a much stronger fencer, because it doesn't shock every time something touches it. Like with the pig, he stayed in just because he'd already been trained on some friends of ours who have a very strong charger. And so he already knew what an electric shock felt like. So when he felt that little tick when he touched the fence, he just stayed well away from it. But you need something really strong and real certain to train them at the beginning, and then after that they'll just stay away from it. But our solar one, it doesn't get you every time.
It's a 0.3 joule, which is about a tenth as big as some of the bigger ones. And so you can sit there and it
just
zap,
ticks at you.
But you'll zap and you could hold on to it without.
Yeah, it's without pain. And so
yes, that is with a good ground for all the people who want to comment on that.
Yeah, it had, but it's also old. It was my dad's for like 20 years. So we're out here trying to figure out how much it'll cost to do these things. I really feel like it's important that we put in some actual fencing too, just because they are poultry and just to give that double security against predators. The other thing that we're thinking about doing is running on this side of the trees, continuing the fence line up and around the trees, and then up and around the trees there, and putting geese in there, because the grass and the alfalfa got really tall this year and it made it really hard to walk out and see if drip lines were going. And so if we put geese in there, they can eat the grass down and fertilize the trees without hurting anything. Ducks, on the other hand, they will root down and eat the roots out of things. So geese are better grazers than ducks are.
So here's my thought on
Yes.
the electric line. We'll run it on the outside of the berm because your ducks won't scratch and dig like the chickens would, correct?
As long as there's no water. If there's water, they'll dig right through it.
Right, so we'll keep that on the outside of the berm somewhere out here, and then, like I said, 4 or 5 feet further, put another fence, and that way you can quarter this into your paddocks and put it in as the dividers with walkways. And we will have to buy a couple of handles to unhitch there, walk through, hitch it back up so you complete your circuit again. Same with up there, so you're going to be walking around, walking and shuffling a lot. And unfortunately the wind is making it difficult to pick up on the camera. But for anybody who has recommendations on an electric fencer, if you've had personal experience with a good hot one, feel free to, let us know, because we still haven't purchased a good one.
Well, and you guys can see how the weeds are growing up on the side of the greenhouse, and not only are they penetrating and going through into the greenhouse, but also they're casting some shade, which on a double layer greenhouse is a bad thing, because you already have a low light situation inside the greenhouse. The addition of the shade from the plants is not helpful. So that's the dual purpose of having the ducks out here. We'll keep the muscovies inside the backyard because they'll have babies, and so having that added safety for the muscovies is a really good thing. And what yes?
That being said, though, how warm is it in there right now? Do you know where
I have it set at 70.
70?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not bad out here. It's about 45.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. If I didn't have the venting going, I would have some cooked rabbits within a day. They're really sensitive to heat, but when I had it turned off because I was inside building the hotbed, it was about 85, 90 degrees. I was feeling pretty uncomfortable. And so the danger of having livestock inside a greenhouse is that they will cook. If something goes wrong with your electricity and you don't have some other kind of venting out there, they'll cook. I do have the arm, the one that's the arm that opens without electricity.
Passive vent.
Yeah, the passive vent. And I've been trying to think of how to use that on the other side, or even on this side. The problem is if you had a strong wind going on this side, it would just rip it off.
Why not just turn the fan off on this side?
Because then you don't have a cross breeze. It doesn't matter if you have something open on the other side. It won't suck any air in. So it won't get as hot. It just will still be very hot. It just won't be 150. It'll just be 110.
Right.
So
did you want to just prop the vent open from this side and turn the fan off?
well, that's the problem. If the wind comes up, you're just blowing Arctic air right in to kill everything.
Right.
Hence why we're writing the book.
Are you talking about right now, or are you talking about when it's 30 below?
It's unpredictable.
Right.
When I was out doing water hoses yesterday, we went from 35 degrees up to 65, depending on whether or not we had the sun behind a cloud. So yeah, we have the quail in there, we have ducks in there, we have rabbits in there. And what will make it even more complicated later is when the hotbed starts to heat up, we're going to have a lot of ammonia buildup in there. And so,
But however, if we can figure out the thermostat setting at the right time, all the heat and all the ammonia will vent.
It will.
Enough that it won't poison the animal.
Yeah, because once it gets to about 70, that's when the hotbed really starts to heat up. And so if we can keep the venting open at that point, it'll never drop below 70 in there, because the venting will keep it moving as the heat builds up and as the gas builds up. So again, huge experiment. It wouldn't be such a big thing if we just had plants in there, but because we have animals in there too, we're taking a pretty big chance. So the other thing Mr. Dirt was talking about was the corridors. This summer, the flies got really, the biting flies got really, really bad for the goats, and it got really hot, and it didn't matter how many of these shelters I set up, the goats just could not get away from the flies, which is one of the reasons that we think Cloud died, is that she was trying to get away from the flies, and somehow, I don't know what she did, but we're pretty sure it had something to do with the heat and the flies. So what we're thinking about is putting in rows of trees. So low fruit bushes, a little bit taller fruit bushes, and then fruit trees here. And that way it would give the goats shade, but none of the taller trees would be close enough to the greenhouse to shade it. And we would have little narrow corridors with electrical line that would protect the trees and give the goats paddock systems. And initially I would run drip lines to it so that whether or not we could get water from the canal for flood irrigating, I could still drip irrigate everything. And it's just important because it would give the goats shade. It would give us a paddock system. We wouldn't need to have the goats on their tethers anymore. And it would add some biodiversity and some layering to our property that would be more resilient than just pasture, because our neighbor doesn't always work well with sharing the water.
What are your thoughts on the goat tearing down the ditch banks?
Well, if we have electrical lines on both sides, which we could just let them use the ditch bank as one of their grazing corridors.
Correct. So you want to graze them in the corridors? I guess if we're gonna close it off with handles,
right,
then that would be doable.
Yeah, and we could just use the ditch as one of their grazing spaces.
But if they're already going to be grazing on it, why don't we just split it into actual quadrants with hallway, with corridors right between?
Oh, we could do that too.
I think that would save on fencing and posting and all that. So what we would end up with is a hallway right between those two T-posts, the red tall one and then the green tall one. And that would come straight back, basically, to the greenhouse berm that I was talking over here, and then we can close that off with the trees. And then the same thing would be about running through the middle of the basement here. We'd have to work around that for the corridor. So
I'm going to sit down and plot it out on paper real good. I need to do that with the watering system anyway, to say this is how I'm going to set it up next year so we don't waste as much pipe, so that it's more straightforward, so that all of the lines are of equal length, so that our pressure is even.
One thought on the water too, what if we move the pump downstream a little bit out to the edge of the trees? And we would have to weed whack that area to keep the grass from growing real good. But
right now I'm able to run it across the ditch where it is, and since I'm adding that line over there to the nut trees and also the line down the road so that we're not having to go across the road, I think it's happiest where it is right now. Because it runs straight across from there to the chain link, which is the middle
Right.
of the property
But
anyway.
you were suggesting saving hose, and that would take off a good 15 feet plus.
Oh, I had
Not
extra hose
not
there.
having to snake around, we would be able to bring it straight across and tee it back here.
It is straight across. What happened here was that I had an extra 50 feet that I didn't want to cut yet because I needed to experiment with it. So yes, it does go straight across. I just took the extra hose out this time when I rolled it up. The extra hose I'm talking about is where I ran hose back and forth between the trees so that I didn't have to have 3 lines, and I just wanted to have 2 lines. So I did 1 line with the dogwood, and then I took 1 line that went from the poplars around to the blue spruce. And so instead what I need to do is just have 3 lines, and then in the front I have a couple spots where hoses loop around trees rather than just going past trees. Because I was just experimenting with it, trying to make sure everybody had water. But now that I know how it works a little bit better, I can run straight lines and not have things loop around and be like, oh, whoops, I guess I didn't get that. I guess I better make another loop.
Oh, look, a cat at the greenhouse. Oh, look, another cat coming for the greenhouse.
Right. I don't think you can make it through, kitty. So I think of all the things that probably have importance before the ground freezes, it might be important to put up an electric fence. And I think it's a good idea to put it outside the berm, because what the goats will do later in the year is they'll come up and paw at it to make dust, to take dust baths. If they were chickens in there, they would also take down the berm.
Well, and they have tried. I mean,
Yes, they have.
This is a patch because they took it completely down
Yeah.
to where it was level and then it was leaking.
Yeah.
So,
Which is why I don't really like to have the chickens out free ranging, because they'll discover a spot that has ants or something in it, and they'll decide to take down the berm to get at the ants, which, I mean, I'm glad they're going for the ants, but maybe what we want to do with that is have the berm itself be the corridor, and we would have to have duplicity of
it would definitely be
stakes.
Dead. You'd have dead vegetation. Are you thinking the ducks would take the berm down too?
If it ever gets wet, they would, yes. There shouldn't be water on that side, but when we flood, there will definitely be water on this side.
Well, I can use the... Yes, as we walk on it, it will tromp it down some more, and we will need to keep patching.
Yes, what?
I said yes, we can use the berm as the corridor. However, it will need patching constantly, and you will want to get a wide berm, a wide path, because you will be carrying things to and fro.
Right. So for those of you who don't know why we have a berm here, it's because this is our drain field, and our 2nd and 3rd year that we lived here, we flooded it twice in one summer.
Well, let's get more detail. Okay, a drain field is what happens after out here in the country, you don't have your typical watering system like inside of a city. And so rather than having a treatment plant, you have a septic tank, which is where most of your sewage ends up breaking down. And then after that, it's become goo. And so after the septic, then it drains into what's called the drain field, which is an underwater or
Gravel pit.
Gravel pit, basically. And ours luckily drains very well. But so you got the house, all the septic sits midway between there, and then the drain field is what the greenhouse is on top of. And our land is porous enough that the water got down to the drain field, and like a swimming pool where you keep adding water, eventually it overflows.
We had 2 feet of water sitting on top of our property for about 7 or 8 hours. And that was when it drained down and completely filled our drain field so that it backed up into our house. We caught it, and we were bucket brigading sewage water out of our basement laundry room. We caught it before it actually flooded the basement. And we bucket brigaded it out to our gravel road.
So we were brigading for a
couple hours. And we just got all the water in buckets and just took it out and dumped it. And we didn't know why it had happened, or because we at that point our house had been empty for 15 years. We didn't know where the septic was. And so a couple weeks later we were watering again, and it happened again, and this time we caught it a lot faster. We were only bucket brigading for a little while, but the problem was that as soon as we caught it, we still had 2 feet that had to go down into the drain field all the way across the whole thing. We had to bucket brigade until all of that had saturated in, and then saturated more. And then for 2 weeks after that, we couldn't flush the toilet unless we had to. We could not take showers here at home. And that was the same year that our well went dry twice. So lots of water in our septic and no water in our well because we overwatered off of our well. She probably got a grasshopper. And so that's why we have a berm around our drain field. We finally figured out where it must be and put a berm around it. And it's why Mr. Dirt wanted to have the greenhouse back here, is because
have this land do something besides grow weeds.
Because the other thing is that we didn't know was why there was this big hill back here. When we first moved here, there was this hill back here, and we didn't know what it was for. Turns out they had bermed it up so that they didn't have water getting into the drain field, but we didn't know that. And they had some dikes out here in the pasture that we didn't realize that they'd done that so that the water wouldn't divert back to the low spot and drowned everything there, but not let water get up to here. We just didn't know. It was kind of a rotten thing to look back on. Kind of hard to look back on how much time and energy we spent just to make it harder for us later. But now we have a ton of flowering trees and flowering bushes and flowering plants, and we're
right now it's fall, and they're kind of hibernating, trees and plants and bushes. She's giving me a flat look right now.
No, we have a lot of flowering trees and flowering bushes and flowering plants now.
In the spring.
So that we can get bees and have them have something to forage with. And so we're thinking about getting bees in the spring. Part of our last tree order was on that line, and so I made sure to get hazelnut, witch hazel, and forsythia because they're very early blossoming plants. And
where do you want to put the hive?
I haven't really thought about it. I guess we could put it out here with the ducks, like put it back here in this corner with some shelter. We have to get some shelter for it so they're not getting knocked over by the wind, and get some shade.
Question I have is, are animals going to start getting stung because they're wandering around the hive a little too close?
Well, the goats wouldn't be in there.
But what about geese? And if you have geese along the trees, then we put it back along the trees, and would you get a bunch of geese around there getting stung? Or if we put it with goats, would they get the goats stung? Or would ducks get stung in the greenhouse? Or...
Well, some people keep their bees in their backyards, and as long as their flight path is not directed directly at a people path, they don't usually bother animals.
So where would our flight path be?
If we put the hive right here, nobody walks there. It would strictly be ducks.
But you have to go back and check it from time to time.
Well, you're going to get stung at that point anyways. Right. I mean, that's not... you have to put a suit on anyway to do that, so I don't know.
That's fine. Did Snowball get a grasshopper or a mouse?
Yeah. He did. He keeps getting underneath his butt.
And poop. I have that exact same look.
Show us, honey.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Show us the look.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like what we will be investing in spring will be a new fencer.
A lot of line.
The line is the least expensive part, and I think that the poles are just about $2, I think, a piece, if we get them from Cal stores.
And we're going to need well over 100. 200.
Yep.
There's 400 in poles, 200 in a charger, and probably 80 to 100 in line.
And I've also got drip line that I've got to put in, so I guess the point is sometimes it's easier just to feed your goats hay and a lot cheaper. The purpose of what we're doing now with it is that we want to create systems that are beneficial to our family in the future and able to produce food for us. I wanted to show you guys the mullein. These mullein have gone to seed. And at the base are the rosettes. Where's my finger? It's the leaves at the bottom that are really furry and small that you want. So that's where the pig was last year. You know, babe, we might want to just keep the pig in here again. I mean, he didn't bother the trees at all.
Well, the bigger trees he didn't bother. I think he trampled the little ones that was just coming out.
Well, you see the ones in the middle, though?
That's the ones I'm thinking of. They were, when we took him to the butcher's, those trees were this big.
Right.
They were only an inch tall. So, I think those ones over there were closer to 6 inches tall at the far end. But I think he would get tired of grazing all this down and go for the trees and eat them. So we could always just cage him like we did those other trees.
Well, that could have been more about the pony than the pig, because the pony was in there a lot longer than the pig was. That could be why they were so short when he was in there.
Right. But what I'm saying, while he was in there, they didn't have a chance to grow and be delicious, tasty pig food.
Well, I guess we could put a cage up around him like we did here.
Exactly. Because this one,
It just needs to be something that can't be pushed away.
hasn't done. How long have we had this cage up? 2 years now?
Yeah.